Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Hal Shurtleff, and I'm with the John Birch Society. I'm the New England coordinator, and I do appreciate you coming out, giving us your time on this cold, rainy November evening. The presentation tonight deals with the free trade issue. Choose freedom, stop the free trade agenda. Before I go into the presentation, it will be about a half hour. Just want to mention a few things we have on the table, or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go to the various websites, Shop JBS, and get this. This is a special issue of the New American Magazine. It came out last year, 2013. Every article deals with some aspects of the free trade issue. The European Union, the North American Union, NAFTA, how destructive it was. Has a lot of very interesting quotes from some of these folks who are pushing this agenda, some people you may be surprised to know. And we have a book written by our CEO, Art Thompson, called International Merger by Foreign Entanglements. It's available on, of course, on the table and also on Shop JBS. And I don't have a copy of this available for sale, and I think it's kind of hard to find on Amazon, but it sort of makes the case. And it's not like we're making stuff up or looking at stuff and drawing wrong conclusions. We're reading their writings, folks. This is an essay, a booklet came out, Building a North American Community, that came out in 2006 or 7, I believe. And one of the persons that wrote an article on this was our former governor of Massachusetts, William Weld. So, and they're advocating this booklet here, published by the Council on Foreign Relations, advocates the merging of Mexico, the United States, and Canada into a one world or one system. That's what a partnership is, or a community. That's what it means. So let me get right into the presentation. Choose freedom, stop the free trade agenda. By the way, if you have a Facebook account, this is a Facebook page. You can go on there and get some updates. Have you ever voted for a politician and were later sorry about your vote? Yes, I'm sure some people who voted yesterday are already sorry for their vote. So yes, we know that happens all the time, all right? There's another deceptive package being presented to the American people, free trade. That notion of free trade sounds, in some people, especially libertarian-leaning people, must be good. It's free and trade. What's wrong with that, right? Sounds good. George Washington, 'tis our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with a portion of the foreign world. That was his farewell address. Have nothing to do with permanent foreign entanglements. Okay? Commerce with all nations, alliance with none shall be our motto. That's Thomas Jefferson, 1789. And he and Washington weren't necessarily on the same page on a lot of things, but on this one they were. I deem the essential principles of our government, peace, commerce, and honest friendship with all nations, entangling alliances with none. Okay? The founders on trade. Trade, a.k.a. commerce, is good. Entangling alliances, bad. Now, as a little aside here, people say, well, we live in the 21st century. How can we not have these things? What would it be if we didn't have these agreements with the rest of the world? Well, most people don't realize that we've always had a global economy. It was a question of who's running the economy. Back in the before we had a U.S. mint, the common currency was a pieces of 8, a Spanish silver coin. Nobody forced that on us. There was no trade agreements. It made sense. It was a nice chunk of silver. You can cut it up easy. It was a good piece of something that was used by all the people in this country without a problem. Back in the 1850s, we were sending boatloads of ice to India. Can you believe that? How did that happen without any rules and regulations, right? So we've always had some type of international commerce. That in itself is not a bad thing. And by the way, the word free trade, the term free trade, in order to have true free trade, certain things have to be present. And von Mises, the great economist, the free market economist, said you have to have a currency that is not controlled or manipulated by the government. You have to have the means of communication and transportation in the hands of the private sector. You don't have that in most countries today. You have to have a court system that would uphold contract law. You may or may not have that in some places. And there's many other variables that are involved. So the purpose of the United States government under our Constitution is to maintain our independence, protect God-given rights, life, liberty, and property. Government was not established to regulate business, form permanent alliances, and abrogate the Constitution. And these free trade agreements, past and present and pending, have doing just that. The Constitution granted Congress the exclusive power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states, Article 1, Section 8. Okay? For a large part of our nation's history, Congress regulated trade with tariff, a fee charged by a government for permitting imports, exports, or products. These tariffs were a main source of revenue for the federal government and were also used to protect certain domestic industries. Now, some people will say, well, tariffs are bad. Would you rather have a tax or a tariff? You see, would you rather have the foreigners pay the tax or ours pay that? And of course, I know we do. When we get the final product, it's all built into it. I understand that. Changes in trade legislation. The formal product of a legislative body, statute, also a decision or determination of a sovereign, a legislative council, or a court of justice, an agreement, right? An arrangement between parties regarding your course of action, a covenant. And by the way, the Constitution doesn't mention agreements. It mentions treaties, but not agreements. A partnership, a legal relation existing between two or more persons contractually associated as joint principals in a business. When I got out of the Army in 1980, a buddy of mine and I bought a boat. We were partners. It was a stupid move. I didn't have a car, so I was at his mercy. That was not my boat. It was my buddy's and my, both of us owned that together. And if there are days when he may not have won out, and you usually need two people operate this thing, to put it in the water, guess what? We didn't go out. So the idea of a partnership sounded good at the time because we pooled our resources, but I lost a lot of my value. I didn't have complete rights to that, okay? People who get involved with land trusts learn that the hard way when they sign the land over to their property over to a land trust. So what is free trade? Free trade, international trade that is free of such government interference as import quotas, export subsidies, and protective tariffs. In 1776, Scottish economist and moral philosopher Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, which established a new trade policy, free trade, that featured the reduction of tariffs and regulations on trade. By the way, I don't know if it's mentioned here, but Karl Marx was also an advocate of free trade. So you say, what? Free trade and freedom? Two different definitions here. In this presentation, we are not criticizing classical free trade policy as established by Adam Smith. And by the way, Adam Smith also advocated a moral imperative too. There are countries we don't want to deal with because of their policies against, for example, communist China, slave labor, goods produced by slave labor, things of that nature. And also that we still have to have some autonomy in our manufacturing in case of war, that we should still reserve the right to protect that industry, which we've not, by the way. But so even things like Adam Smith, he didn't believe in absolute free trade to the detriment of our nation, or of a nation. However, we do not criticize the present day. However, we do criticize the present day free trade policy that consists of negotiating complex trade agreements between two or more nations that reduce tariffs, but they also include provisions for managed trade as well as for non-trade entanglements. We call this the free trade agenda. Okay. Example of free trade deception. Now, we're all familiar with the European Union today. Well, let's start out as a very harmless entity called the European Coal and Steel Community in 1952. I think there was about 8 or 9 nations, right? The European Economic Community, 1957. European Union, the Maastricht Treaty, 1992. The EU Constitution, Lisbon Treaty, 2007. So from just a little coal and steel business to basically a central government. And as of 2013, the EU has 28 member states. I had the pleasure of meeting the former head of the president of the European Union. I think they take 1-year positions each president of a country. Václav Klaus of the Czech Republic. I met him in New York City. I was reporting on the climate change issue, and he hates the European Union. I mean, he was the president of it, but he really hated it. He realized it was a very deceptive thing. So here you can't see, but this is, and I can give you these slides if you like. It has the whole history of the European Union and how it was deception from the very beginning, okay? Here is a former EU official. It has now become clear to us that what we thought was a common market is nothing more than a project to create a European federal superstate in which our sovereignty, Britain's national identity, would be extinguished. And I actually have one copy of this book, more on how the Europeans were deceived. The EU is a slow-motion coup d'etat, the most spectacular coup d'etat in history. And that's Christopher Booker, the co-author of The Great Deception. which is on Amazon for very short money, by the way, a couple of dollars. Transition in American trade policy. The Constitution gave Congress power to regulate foreign trade, Article 1, Section 8, which I mentioned earlier. Congress begins to delegate trade policy authority to the President, 1934. Right? That's unconstitutional. That's a power reserved to Congress, not to the President. Congress cedes more trade policy authority to present day with fast track authority, 1974. Some people thought fast track was just, I think, a more recent issue, but it's going back to 1974. Fast track, enabler of the free trade agenda. Congress gives presidential authority to negotiate trade agreements. See, the Constitution says presidents negotiate treaties and then presents them to the Senate, not agreements. Requires Congress to vote completed agreements up or down within 60 days with no amendments or filibusters. So let the President do our job for us, and we're just going to vote yes or no. No deliberation here. Just take it as it is. Fast track in effect from 1974 to 1994, and then reestablished 2002, 2007. And of course, they want to establish it again so they can give us these treaties we'll be talking about in a few minutes. Not treaties, I mean agreements. Okay, from NAFTA to the North American Union. Reagan's North America Accord, 1979. Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreements, 1989. By the way, before NAFTA, we had a very small trade deficit with Canada, about $10 billion a year. It's almost $100 billion a year. And before NAFTA, Mexico, we actually had a trade surplus of about $10 billion. Now we have a trade deficit of over $100 billion. So NAFTA was not very beneficial to the United States at all. Okay, North American Free Trade Agreement. And some of you may have been, if you were members of the John Birch Society in those days, you remember that we played a key role in trying to stop this. I don't think there was much sentiment by the average voter. You remember Ross Perot was campaigning against this. He said the great sucking sound that you'll hear will be American jobs, right? We already lost a lot of industry, but this really put a death knell. I get a chance to travel around the Northeast and at one point the Midwest and the South, and where it used to be booming factories, like in Michigan, you know, vacuum, I think it was Hoover Vacuum Cleaning Company. Boy, they moved out awfully quick, just for lease or for sale. Go down to Bethlehem, it's a ghost town. The biggest steel mill in the world. It's now one big lot. So didn't help us any. And by the way, it was both Democrats and Republicans. It was Bill Clinton that signed it into law. Guys like Newt Gingrich, conservative Newt Gingrich, was also a big champion of that, and Ronald Reagan and all the ex-presidents also pushed this. So the fix was in at the top. Well, unions didn't want it, and so it's kind of interesting to see a lot of unions work with people like Pat Buchanan and the John Birch Society to oppose it, but they sold out. Security and Prosperity Partnership, 2005. That was something that that Bush tried to push. North American Leaders Summit, 2005 to now. And Free Trade Agenda Timeline. Well, I guess you can't see this, although this is in the magazine that I mentioned earlier. And these are three for $1, by the way. So all this, the graphics are in there. Free Trade Area of the Americas, 1994, 2005. Now, I remember there's a film clip, a video clip of President Bush. It would be W. Bush, the son. And usually when he was being interviewed, he was never very clear. Hem and haw on issues. Ask him an issue about the Second Amendment and hem and haw. What about the abortion issue? Hem and haw, because he was never really believed anything. You know, that was. But when it came to the North American Union and the SPP, he got up there. He didn't have to read a teleprompter. He said, "We're going to have this done by 2005, at whatever time frame it was, 2009. Well, it hasn't happened. And the John Birch Society played a key role in stopping that when there were very few organizations even out there, even touching this issue. I mean, a lot of people were just not interested. There were other things probably got their attention. Many times a key issue is put aside deliberately by the mass media. I remember when NAFTA was being debated, I think either it was a Kennedy rape charge, one of the Kennedy sons or boys or nephews, or it may have been the O.J. Simpson. I don't remember, but that was getting all the news attention. The selling out of our sovereignty was sort of on the back page of the newspapers and on the online. Well, not too much online in those days, right? FTAA and SPP fizzled out in 05 to 09, due largely to opposition by the John Birch Society. Not only, but exclusively. Not exclusively, but primarily. And then, so this is coming up now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. They probably will not take a vote this year. It's November of 2014, although one of the most dangerous things is a lame duck Congress, right? So that's how they got through NAFTA and the WTO. So, and unfortunately, Mr. Rand Paul, who's someone that a lot of people in this room support, has recently come out in favor of this. He's saying, Obama, we want to vote on this. You know, to me, if Obama wants something, it must be bad. That's all I need to know, right? So, and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, and that vote is expected in 2015. Okay, negotiations 2010 to present, vote by late 2014. 12 Pacific Rim nations, including U.S., Canada, Mexico, Japan, Australia, Singapore, EU-type bloc for Asian Pacific region, leading to economic and political integration of all 21 nations of APEC, including China and Russia. Do we really want to be involved with countries like this, some type of integration? Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, TTIP. It's really hard to follow all these entities here, but the magazine has a lot of this information here. It's almost like the slideshow is in this magazine here. Negotiations 2013 to present. By the way, they're being held in secret. Why do they hold it? If it's such a wonderful thing, and it's supposed to benefit the Americans, U.S. citizens, why do they get a hold of it in secret? Why can't it be on C-SPAN? Why can't Bill McNally show up with his camera and tape it all, right? and then Adrian, with his frequent flyer miles, takes them over wherever they're doing this, right? A free trade agreement between U.S. and the European Union. We know what free trade means to the European Union. Would lead to economic and political integration of the United States and the EU. A key educational resource, how the free trade agenda is knocking down America. I just mentioned it here. The free trade agenda threatens our rights, global merger, peace by, these are the various articles. The EU, regionalization, thumb sovereignty, North American Union from NAFTA to the NAU, fast track enabler of the free trade agreement, regional schemes for the Pacific Rim, EU-US, transatlantic convergence, preserve your rights, stop the free trade agenda. Okay. And these were some of the tools that we have that are available now. We have many that will be under production. Now, how can you stop this free trade agenda? Now, let me just get back up a little bit here. 2005, we got word of the the SPP and the North American Union. Well, what we did as an organization, we had a special issue of the New American, something like this. I think it had a green cover with a Canadian flag, a Mexican flag and a U.S. flag sort of merged together. We had resolutions that were designed to be introduced to state legislators. Really, it was non-binding, but it was a resolution. And we also had a couple of very informative DVDs and CDs, as well as pamphlets and brochures. And we hit the state houses, every single one of them. I know my friend here, Jim Eklund, helped me, and I think he went on his own one day. He just grabbed some magazines, went up to the Boston State House, the Capitol there in Boston, and put these out. But I visited state houses all over the Northeast and Midwest. At that time, I was covering a larger area. We visited unions. You know, we went to auto unions in Detroit. We went to unions all over the place. We did a mailing. We mailed about 1 million hard copy to businesses with a cover letter. Now these are, that's about $2 or $3 a piece. So we raised a lot of money. We had some people that were very interested in making this happen, stopping this. So it took a lot of took money, and it also took a lot of shoe leather. We had information tables on this subject. We give, and all of our chapters received a 20 or 30 minute presentation on a video by our CEO. He wasn't CEO at that time, Art Thompson. And it was so well received that people said, we need to make more copies of this. This was just a message to the members, so to speak. And it became so popular that, hey, we have to make this available and put it out, get it out on cyberspace or what have you. Let a lot of other people see what's being done. And what happened is other groups sort of jumped on board. And we were able to, we had a contingent of people at one of their, they had one of their conferences in Banff, Canada. I think John McManus, our president, was there. And I know Alex Jones, the radio show guy, was there, I think, and many, many other folks. All of a sudden, people started to, Lou Dobbs, too. Lou Dobbs was one of the few at that time that was on a national media that was opposing this. And within a few months, more than a few months, the tides changed a little bit, and they actually put it on the back burner. And Robert Pastor, who was one of the key members, he was sort of the grandfather of this North American Union. In fact, he's the one that's, I mentioned this, some of you came in a little bit late, Building a North American Community with Bill Weld, an article on there. He blamed the John Birch Society for the fact that it didn't go through. But these folks never sleep. It's not like they say, oh, well, they figured it out. We're just going back to bed. We're just going to stop. That doesn't how it works. So these trade deals threaten our national independence, our freedoms, and our economy. So we ask that you educate others with the tools on the previous slide. And like I said, I do have some of these here available. Provide leadership to your groups in your area. Now, some of you belong to Tea Party groups. Some of you belong to trade groups. Maybe you belong to a union. Maybe you belong to a Rotary Club. You don't have to be it doesn't have to be a Congress or the resolution passed by the state legislature. It could be something that you do at your local Rotary Club. And that becomes newsworthy. I know a lady up in northern New Hampshire at the time. She belonged to some group. I can't remember what kind of group it was. Maybe it was a Grange. It was one of the Grange Hall groups. And that group up there passed a resolution against the North American Union, and it made news. We made sure that every time we do something like this, send out news releases. And more people saw this, and when we send a news release out, we ask at the end for more information, please contact us, and lots of people did. And we also got on radio shows. I don't know if we had any C-SPAN engagements. We may have had some, but we got a lot of radio show, a lot of talk show hosts. A lot of the talk show hosts out there are looking for guests. And your best bet is the local talk, not the national syndicated talk. They're pretty much bought and paid for. You won't hear Mark Levin. Americans for Prosperity is a group that sponsors him. They're not going to touch this. They're completely in favor of this, right? But you're going to have local ones.